The auctioneer's gavel struck, would like a judge passing sentence. And Katherine Montgomery felt her heart crack clean in two as she watched the last rope securing her old milk cow change hands to Walter Brennan, the cattle buyer from Denver. It was late spring in 1881, and Colorado City sprawled beneath the shadow of Pikes Peak like a town caught between ambition and poverty. The settlement had grown considerably since the gold rush days, but for Katherine, prosperity remained as distant as the snow-capped summit looming over the valley. The auction yard smelled of manure and desperation, and she stood among the other sellers with her shoulders straight and her chin high, though every fiber of her being wanted to crumble into the dust. Lot 47, sold for $18, the auctioneer called out, and Katherine's fingers tightened around the folded paper in her pocket. The notice from the general store detailing exactly how much credit she had exhausted, and how much food $18 might buy if she stretched it carefully enough. Her son Thomas waited at home, 9 years old and growing like a weed despite the lean months since his father had died. Consumption had taken Robert Montgomery 2 winters past, leaving Katherine with a small homestead 5 miles outside town, a milk cow, some chickens that had mostly been taken by foxes, and debt that grew like prairie grass. The cow had been their last valuable possession, the creature that had given them milk to drink and butter to sell. But Thomas needed to eat more than he needed milk, and the vegetable garden would not produce for another month at least. Katherine collected her payment from the clerk, tucking the bills and coins into her dress pocket with hands that trembled despite her efforts at composure. She was 26 years old, though some days she felt twice that age. The sun had bronzed her skin and put fine lines at the corners of her green eyes, and her honey-colored hair, pinned severely back, showed streaks where worry had begun to silver it prematurely. She was turning to leave when she heard the commotion near the holding pens. "I said I am buying lot 47, a man's voice rang out, deep and carrying an edge of iron that suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed. "Name your price, Brennan." Katherine paused despite herself, glancing back over her shoulder. The speaker was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty trail coat. He wore a black Stetson pulled low, but she could see the hard planes of his face, weathered by sun and wind into the color of old leather. A dark beard covered his jaw, neatly trimmed, and when he moved she noticed the confident, economical grace of a man who spent more time in the saddle than on foot. "The cow's mine, bought and paid for," Brennan protested, but there was uncertainty in his voice. The tall man had the look of someone not to be trifled with, despite the quiet courtesy of his tone. "And I will pay you double what you gave for her," the stranger said, "plus your trouble and your time. That seems fair compensation for 5 minutes of ownership." Katherine should have walked away. The transaction was complete. The money in her pocket would buy flour and cornmeal and salt pork, and what happened to the cow afterward was none of her concern. But something rooted her feet to the spot, and she watched as Brennan calculated his odds and his profit and finally nodded agreement. Bills changed hands, and the tall man took possession of the rope attached to Katherine's former cow. He turned then, scanning the dispersing crowd, and his eyes, startlingly blue beneath the brim of his hat, found Katherine with unerring accuracy. He walked toward her leading the cow, and she realized with a start that she should have left when she had the chance, because she did not trust the sudden hammering of her heart or the weakness in her knees. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said, and his voice up close was even deeper than it had been across the yard. "I believe this is your animal." Katherine stared at him. "Sir, I do not understand. I sold her fairly." "And I bought her back," he said simply. He held out the rope. "She is yours again." "I cannot pay you." The words came out sharper than she intended, pride and confusion making her tone brittle. "Whatever game you are playing, I want no part of it." Something flickered in those blue eyes, might have been hurt or might have been understanding. "No game, madam. No strings attached. I heard you sold your last cow to buy food for your boy, and it seemed to me a woman should not have to make that choice." "You heard wrong." Catherine's cheeks flushed hot. "My son and I are managing perfectly well. We do not need charity from strangers." "I am sure you are managing," he said quietly. "I am sure you have been managing through sheer force of will and determination for longer than anyone should have to. But managing is not the same as thriving, and there is no shame in accepting a kindness. I do not even know who you are." "Yates Ashford," he said, and touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was somehow both respectful and intimate. "I have a ranch about 15 miles north of here, up near the base of the mountains. I knew your husband slightly. We worked together on a cattle drive 6 or 7 years back, before he settled down. When I heard in town that Robert Montgomery's widow was selling her milk cow, I thought it would be something he would want me to do, looking after his family." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. "Robert has been gone 2 years. No one has bothered about us in all that time." "I have been in Wyoming," Yates said. "Bought a herd and spent 18 months getting it back to Colorado. I only returned 3 weeks ago and heard about Robert then. I am sorry for your loss. He was a good man." The cow lowed softly, as if impatient with the conversation. Katherine looked at the animal, at the rope in Yates Ashford's sun-browned hand, at the man himself who stood there with patient courtesy waiting for her to make a decision she did not know how to make. "If I take her, I am still where I started," she said finally. "I sold her because we needed money for food. Taking her back does not solve that problem." "Then allow me to buy milk from you," Yates said. "I will pay fair price, same as I would pay at any dairy. My ranch has 6 men working it right now, and they would appreciate fresh milk and butter. We have been making do with canned milk, and it is poor stuff. Your ranch is 15 miles away. How would I deliver it? I will send one of my men twice a week to collect it, Wednesdays and Saturdays if that suits you." Katherine studied his face, searching for the catch, the hidden motive, the inevitable price that would be demanded. But Yates Ashford looked back at her with steady patience, and she saw nothing in his expression except a genuine desire to help without condition. "Why?" she asked. "Why go to all this trouble for people you do not know?" "Because I watched my own mother struggle after my father died," he said, and for the first time, a shadow crossed his face. "Because I was 12 years old and helpless to do much about it, and because now I am not helpless anymore. Because Robert Montgomery once shared his water with me in desert country when I had run dry and had too much pride to ask. Because it is the right thing to do." He paused. "And because you should not have to choose between your cow and feeding your son." The defenses Katherine had built so carefully around her heart trembled. She reached out slowly and took the rope from his hand, her fingers brushing his palm for just a moment. The contact sent a shock through her that she told herself was simple surprise. "Thank you," she managed. "I do not know how to properly thank you. No thanks needed." Yates smiled, and the expression transformed his stern face into something approaching handsome. "Just keep her healthy and producing, and we will call it square." Katherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak further. She turned to lead the cow away, then paused and looked back. "Mr. Ashford, would you consider staying for supper? It is the least I can offer for your kindness, and it is growing late. You would be welcome." She had not planned to say it. The words emerged of their own accord, surprising her as much as they seemed to surprise him. But having spoken them, she found she did not want to take them back. There was something about Yates Ashford that made her want to know more, to understand the man who would pay double for a cow just to give it back to a struggling widow. Yates hesitated, and she saw him weighing the propriety of it, a single man dining with a widow in her home. Then he nodded slowly. "I would be honored, Mrs. Montgomery. Thank you." They walked together out of town, Katherine leading the cow and Yates leading his horse, a big chestnut gelding with a white blaze and intelligent eyes. The afternoon sun slanted golden across the valley, and the air smelled of sage and pine and the lingering snow from the high peaks. They did not talk much during the 5-mile walk, but the silence was comfortable rather than awkward, broken occasionally by comments about the weather or the landscape. Katherine's homestead sat in a small valley with a creek running through it, good water that never ran dry even in summer. The house was modest, just 3 rooms built of logs and chinked carefully against the winter cold. The barn was smaller still, barely large enough for the cow and the few chickens that remained. The vegetable garden showed green shoots in neat rows, and wildflowers bloomed in riotous colors along the fence line. Thomas burst out of the house when he saw them coming, a gangly boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's dark hair. He stopped short when he saw the cow, and then his gaze fixed on the tall stranger. "Thomas, this is Mr. Ashford," Katherine said. "He has bought back our cow, bought her back." Thomas's eyes went wide. "Why would someone do that?" "Because sometimes people do kind things," Katherine said firmly, though she was not entirely sure she believed it herself. "Mr. Ashford knew your father. He is going to buy milk from us regularly." Thomas stepped forward and extended his hand with a gravity beyond his years. "Thank you, sir. We appreciate your kindness." Yates shook the boy's hand solemnly. "You are welcome, Thomas. Your father was a good friend to me once. I am glad to help his family." "I do not remember him much," Thomas said, and there was old pain in his young voice. "I was only 7 when he died." "He would be proud of you," Yates said. "I can see you have been the man of the house, helping your mother." Thomas straightened his shoulders at that, and Katherine felt her throat tighten. The boy tried so hard to fill shoes far too large for him, and she hated that he had to carry such burdens so young. "Mr. Ashford will be staying for supper," Katherine said. "Thomas, please take the cow to the barn and make sure she has feed and water." "Yes, madam." Thomas took the rope and led the cow away, glancing back over his shoulder at Yates with open curiosity. Katherine turned to Yates. "You can put your horse in the barn as well. There is hay and a bucket for water. I need to prepare the meal, but it will not take long." "Let me help," Yates said. "I can chop wood if you need it, or haul water, or whatever else requires doing." "I can manage," Katherine began, then stopped herself. She had been managing alone for 2 years, and she was tired of managing. "Actually, more wood would be helpful. The pile is around back." While Yates chopped wood and Thomas tended the cow, Katherine went inside and surveyed her meager supplies with dismay. She had been planning simple fare for herself and Thomas, cornbread and beans, but now she had a guest, and pride demanded she offer something more substantial. The $18 in her pocket would buy better supplies tomorrow, but that did not help tonight. She settled on making do with what she had, cooking the last of the salt pork to flavor the beans, and mixing up cornbread with the precious remainder of her cornmeal. There were dried apples she had been hoarding, and she stewed them with a little sugar to make a dessert. It was plain food, frontier fare, but it was prepared with care and served with the last of her determination to maintain dignity in reduced circumstances. Yates and Thomas came in together, the boy chattering about the cow and asking questions about ranching that Yates answered with patient detail. Katherine watched them as she set the table, her emotions a complicated tangle. Thomas was hungry for male guidance, for a father figure, and she could see him already attaching himself to this stranger with the kind voice and steady manner. It made her grateful and terrified in equal measure. They sat down to eat, and Yates bowed his head briefly before picking up his fork. "This looks wonderful, Mrs. Montgomery. I have not had a home-cooked meal in longer than I care to admit." "It is simple," Katherine said, embarrassed by the plainness of the fare. "Simple food prepared with care beats fancy restaurant cooking any day," Yates said. He took a bite of the cornbread and closed his eyes briefly. "This is perfect. My mother used to make cornbread just like this." "Is your mother still living?" Katherine asked, then immediately regretted the question when she saw his face. "She passed 4 years ago," Yates said quietly. "Pneumonia. By then I had the ranch and could have given her an easier life, but she did not live to see it. That is one of my great regrets." "I am sorry," Katherine said, and meant it. "That must have been very difficult." It was. Yates looked at her across the table, and something passed between them, a recognition of shared grief and survival. "But we endure, we go on, we try to honor their memory by living well." Thomas spoke up. "Mama says Papa would want us to be strong and brave." "Your mama is right," Yates said. "And I can see you both are." The meal continued with easier conversation. Thomas asked about the ranch, and Yates described it in detail, painting pictures with words of the mountain meadows and the herd he was building, Herefords bred for the harsh Colorado winters. He talked about his men, rough but loyal, and the hard work of establishing a successful operation in unforgiving country. Katherine listened and watched, noting the way Yates's face animated when he talked about his land, the love evident in every word. This was a man who had found his purpose and was building something to last. There was an integrity about him that she found herself drawn to despite her determination to remain independent. After supper, Thomas was sent reluctantly to bed, and Katherine and Yates sat on the porch in the gathering darkness, the mountains black silhouettes against a sky full of stars. The spring night was cool but not cold, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. "You have made a good home here," Yates said. "It takes strength to keep a place running alone." "I have not had much choice," Katherine said. "When Robert died, I could have gone back east to my family, but this is Thomas's home. This is where his father is buried. I could not take that from him." "Many women would have done just that. Many women would have been smarter than me," Katherine laughed without humor. "There have been times I questioned the decision, especially when the money ran out and the work piled up faster than I could manage it." "Will you stay now?" Yates asked. "Now that you have income from the milk?" "I do not know," Katherine admitted. "The money from the milk will help truly, but it is not enough to cover everything. The property taxes are coming due, and there are repairs needed that I cannot afford. I have been trying to decide if I should sell the land and start over somewhere else, but even that seems impossible some days." Yates was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Would you consider hiring out for other work, cooking, for instance, laundry, mending?" "My men are making do with their own poor cooking and shirts that are more whole than fabric. I would pay fair wages for someone to come to the ranch a few times a week." Katherine turned to look at him, trying to read his expression in the darkness. "Is this charity again, Mr. Ashford?" "No, madam. It is a business proposition. I need the help genuinely, and you need the income. I am proposing a fair exchange of labor for wages." "How would I get there? 15 miles is a long walk." "I would send a wagon for you." "You could come on the days we collect milk, do a day's work, and be home by evening. Or if that is too long a day, you could stay over and return the next morning. We have a spare room in the ranch house." Katherine's mind raced through the implications. The money would be welcome, desperately needed really, but spending time at Yates's ranch in close quarters with him and his men would fuel talk in town. She had managed to avoid scandal so far by keeping to herself, but this would be different. As if reading her thoughts, Yates said, "It would all be proper and above board. My men are rough, but they are respectful. Anyone who was not would answer to me. And Mrs. Patterson from town comes out once a week to do cleaning. You would have another woman around regularly." "Let me think about it," Katherine said finally. "It is a generous offer and I appreciate it, but I need to consider what is best for Thomas, of course." Yates stood, stretching his long frame. "I should be heading back. It is a long ride in the dark." Katherine rose as well. "Thank you again, Mr. Ashford, for everything today. You have been extraordinarily kind." "Yates," he said. "Please call me Yates, and I hope you will consider my offer seriously. I meant what I said. It is not charity. I truly need the help." He collected his horse from the barn, and Katherine walked with him to the edge of the property. The night was full of sounds, insects singing, the creek burbling, the wind in the pines. Yates mounted with the ease of long practice, and from horseback he looked even taller, silhouetted against the stars. "Good night, Katherine," he said, and the use of her first name sent warmth through her chest. "I will send someone on Saturday for the milk." "Good night, Yates," she replied, and watched him ride away into the darkness, the sound of hoofbeats fading gradually until only the night sounds remained. She stood there for a long time, hugging herself against the chill, thinking about the strange turn her life had taken in a single afternoon. This morning she had been alone and desperate, selling her last resource to feed her child. Tonight she had her cow back, a promise of income, and the memory of blue eyes that looked at her with something she had not seen in a very long time. Hope, she realized. That was what she had seen in Yates Ashford's eyes. Not pity, not obligation, but genuine hope that he could help and that she would accept it. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Katherine sold the $18 she had gotten for the cow to buy supplies at the general store, carefully budgeting every penny. The store owner, Mr. Henderson, raised his eyebrows when she came in so soon after selling her cow, but made no comment beyond the usual pleasantries. Word traveled fast in a small town, and she knew people would be talking about Yates Ashford buying back the cow. Let them talk. She had more important things to worry about. The cow resumed her place in the barn as if she had never left, and Katherine fell back into the rhythm of morning and evening milking. The amount of milk was more than she and Thomas needed, so she began making butter and soft cheese, preparations for when Yates's man came to collect. Saturday arrived bright and clear, and Katherine found herself more nervous than the occasion warranted. She had the milk ready in clean jars, butter wrapped in cloth, and a small round of cheese that had turned out better than expected. She had also, though she told herself it was foolish, taken extra care with her appearance, putting on her better dress and arranging her hair more carefully than usual. Thomas noticed. "You look nice, Mama." "Thank you, sweetheart." Katherine tried to keep her tone casual. "I thought I should look presentable for Mr. Ashford's man." "Are you hoping Mr. Ashford comes himself?" Thomas asked with the uncomfortable perception of children. "Of course not. Why would he come himself when he has men to run errands?" But even as she said it, she found herself hoping that Thomas was right, that it would be Yates riding up the path rather than a stranger. She told herself it was because she had questions about his work offer, practical considerations that needed discussing. She did not let herself examine the flutter in her stomach or the way she kept glancing out the window. When hoofbeats finally sounded mid-morning, she looked out to see not one rider but two. Yates was in the lead on his chestnut horse, and behind him came a younger man on a paint gelding, leading a pack mule. Katherine wiped her hands on her apron and went out to meet them, Thomas trailing behind her. Yates dismounted with that same easy grace she remembered, sweeping off his hat. "Good morning, Katherine. I hope you do not mind that I came myself. I wanted to introduce you properly to Jake here." He gestured to the younger man, who looked to be in his early 20s, with sandy hair and a friendly, open face. "Jake Miller works for me, and he will be making the regular runs for milk. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Montgomery." Jake touched his hat respectfully. "Mr. Ashford speaks highly of your dairy products." "He has not tasted them yet," Katherine said with a smile. "I hope they live up to expectations." "I am sure they will," Yates said. "Is everything ready?" Katherine showed them to the springhouse where she had stored the milk, butter, and cheese. Yates examined each item with the careful attention of someone who knew quality when he saw it. "This is excellent work," he said. "Jake, load everything carefully." "Mrs. Montgomery, what do I owe you?" They negotiated a fair price, and Yates paid in cash, counting out the bills and coins into Katherine's hand. The amount was generous without being excessive, enough that she could accept it without feeling like charity. "Thank you," she said. "Jake, I will have the same ready for you on Wednesday if that suits." "Yes, madam," Jake said. He had finished loading the mule and stood holding the lead rope. "Same time as today. That would be perfect." Jake mounted his horse and headed off with the mule, but Yates did not immediately follow. Instead, he stood there, his hat in his hands, looking like a man trying to find the right words. "Have you thought more about my offer?" he finally asked. "About coming to the ranch to cook and do some household work?" "I have thought of little else," Katherine admitted, "but I still have concerns." "Tell me your concerns. Perhaps we can address them." Katherine glanced at Thomas, who was pretending to be busy but was clearly listening to every word. "Thomas, would you go check on the chickens, please?" The boy looked rebellious for a moment, then trudged off toward the small chicken coop. When he was out of earshot, Katherine turned back to Yates. "I am concerned about appearances," she said bluntly. "A widow spending time at a bachelor's ranch, even for work, will cause talk." "The talk will fade," Yates said. "People gossip, but they also respect honest work. And as I said, Mrs. Patterson is there regularly. She is a respected woman in the community, married to the pastor. Her presence lends propriety." "I am concerned about leaving Thomas," Katherine continued. "He is only 9. I do not like the idea of him being alone." "Bring him with you," Yates said immediately. "He can help with light chores, and it will be good for him to be around the ranch, learn some skills. I will pay him a small wage as well." Katherine opened her mouth to protest and closed it again. Every objection she raised, Yates met with a reasonable solution. It was almost as if he had anticipated her concerns and thought through how to address them. "What are you really afraid of?" Yates asked gently. "Because I do not think it is gossip or propriety or any of those practical things. I think it is something else." Katherine looked at him, at those steady blue eyes that seemed to see right through her defenses. "I am afraid of dependence," she said quietly. "I am afraid of relying on someone and having them disappear. I'm afraid of trust." "That is fair," Yates said. "Robert's death left you alone when you needed him most. Of course you would be wary of depending on anyone again." "It is not just Robert," Katherine said, surprised at her own honesty. "My father was unreliable, always chasing the next scheme, the next promise of wealth. We moved constantly when I was growing up, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. When I married Robert, I thought I had finally found stability. And then he died, and I realized that stability is an illusion. Everything can be taken away in an instant." Yates was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. Then he said, "You are right that everything can be taken away. Life offers no guarantees, but that does not mean we should not try to build something anyway. All I am offering is honest work for honest pay, Catherine. Nothing more, nothing less. If you work for me for a week and decide it is not suitable, you can stop with no hard feelings. But I think you need the income, and I think you are too proud to accept help unless it comes packaged as employment. Catherine found herself smiling despite everything. You see right through me, do you not? I recognize a kindred spirit, Yates said. I was just as proud when I was struggling to build my ranch. I refused help even when I desperately needed it, until I finally learned that accepting assistance is not weakness. It is wisdom. When would you want me to start? Whenever you are ready. This coming Wednesday, if you like. Jake can bring the wagon large enough for you and Thomas both. You could work through the day, stay overnight if it gets too late, and return Thursday. Or if you prefer, work a half day and return the same evening. Whatever suits you best. Catherine took a deep breath. All right, I will try it. Wednesday. A full day, and we will see how it goes. The smile that broke across Yates's face was like sunshine breaking through clouds. Thank you. You will not regret this, Catherine. I promise. He put his hat back on and mounted his horse, and Catherine watched him ride away with feelings she could not quite name. She was taking a risk, she knew that. Not just the practical risk of the arrangement not working out, but the deeper, more frightening risk of opening herself up to another person, of letting someone into the carefully guarded space she had created around herself and Thomas. But as she went back to her chores, she found herself humming, something she had not done since before Robert died. And when Thomas asked her later why she seemed so happy, she could not give him an answer that made sense even to herself. Wednesday morning dawned cool and misty, the kind of spring weather that promised heat later in the day. Catherine woke early, packed supplies for herself and Thomas, and tried not to pace nervously while waiting for Jake to arrive with the wagon. She had prepared the milk and butter the night before, and everything was ready, but she still found herself checking and rechecking, straightening her dress, smoothing her hair. You really do like him, Thomas observed, watching her with those two perceptive eyes. I do not know what you mean, Catherine said, knowing it was a lie. Mr. Ashford, you like him. It is all right, Mama, I like him too. He seems like a good man. Catherine knelt down so she was at eye level with her son. Thomas, Mr. Ashford has been very kind to us, but we must not read more into his kindness than is there. He is being helpful because he knew your father, nothing more. Papa has been gone 2 years, Thomas said seriously. You should not have to be alone forever. I have you, Catherine said, her throat tight. I am not alone. You know what I mean. Before Catherine could respond, the sound of a wagon announced Jake's arrival. She stood, brushing off her skirt, and went out to meet him. The wagon was sturdy, with a bench seat and a covered bed, suitable for hauling supplies or passengers. Jake jumped down to help them load the milk supplies, and then assisted Catherine onto the seat while Thomas scrambled into the back. The ride to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, following a rough track that wound through increasingly rugged terrain. Jake kept up a steady stream of friendly chatter, telling stories about ranch life and the various characters who worked there. Catherine listened with half her attention, the other half occupied with her own thoughts and the growing nervousness about what she had agreed to. The ranch, when they finally arrived, was more impressive than she had expected. The main house was a large log structure with a wide porch, well built and well maintained. The barn was even larger, solid and professional, with a network of corrals and outbuildings that spoke of serious ranching operations. Cattle grazed in distant meadows, and the whole property had an air of purposeful prosperity. Yates emerged from the house as the wagon pulled up, and Catherine felt her heart do an uncomfortable flip. He wore work clothes, denim pants and a blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his hat pushed back on his head. He looked relaxed and at home in a way she had not seen before, and something about the sight of him made her mouth go dry. "Welcome," he said, coming to help her down from the wagon. His hands on her waist were firm and warm, and he held her a moment longer than necessary before releasing her. "How was the journey?" "Fine," Katherine managed. "Jake is an excellent driver." "And an excellent talker," Thomas added, jumping down from the wagon bed. "He told us about the bear that tried to steal the bacon last summer." "That bear is a menace," Yates agreed, laughing. "We finally had to move the smokehouse and reinforce it. Come inside, let me show you around." The interior of the house was masculine and spare but clean and well organized. The main room served as kitchen, dining area and sitting room, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was handmade but solid, and everything was functional without being fancy. "The men sleep in the bunkhouse," Yates explained. "It is just me in the main house most of the time. There are 2 bedrooms upstairs, and the spare room I mentioned is through here." He showed her a small room off the main area, simply furnished with a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. A window looked out over the mountains, and the morning light streaming in gave it a peaceful quality. "If you ever need to stay over, you and Thomas can use this room," Yates said. "It has a good lock on the door, and you would have complete privacy." Katherine nodded, appreciating his attention to propriety. "It is very nice. You have a lovely home." "It is becoming what I want it to be," Yates said. "Slowly. There is always more work than time to do it." He gestured back toward the main room. "As for today, the kitchen is yours to command. The men take breakfast at dawn and dinner at sunset, and they pack their own midday meal. Today, they have already eaten breakfast, so you need only concern yourself with the evening meal. In the meantime, I thought you could assess what supplies are needed, plan menus, whatever you think is necessary. And what about mending and laundry? Jake will show you the bunkhouse. There is a wash area set up there, and the men have bags of mending that have been accumulating. Take whatever you think you can manage today, and we will establish a regular schedule going forward." It was all very reasonable and business-like, and Katherine felt some of her nervousness ease. This was just work, honest employment, nothing to be anxious about. Thomas was dispatched with Jake to learn about feeding chickens and collecting eggs, and Katherine set about exploring the kitchen. The supplies were basic but adequate, and she began making mental lists of what could be improved, what meals she could prepare with what was on hand. It felt good to be planning for more than just herself and Thomas, to be using her skills for something beyond mere survival. She was elbow-deep in sorting through the pantry when she heard Yates come back inside. She turned to find him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "You look happy," he observed. "I suppose I am," Katherine admitted. "It feels good to be useful, to have a purpose beyond just getting through each day." "You have always been useful," Yates said. "You have been keeping yourself and your son alive and healthy in difficult circumstances. That is no small thing." "But that is just existing," Katherine said. "This is different. This is creating something, contributing something." She gestured at the kitchen. "I can make this place feel like a home, Yates. Your men deserve that. You deserve that." Something flickered in Yates's eyes, something warm and intense that made Katherine's breath catch. But all he said was, "Then I am glad you are here." They stood looking at each other for a long moment, and Katherine felt the air between them thicken with unspoken things. She was acutely aware of how close he was, near enough that she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the silver threading through his dark hair, the way his throat moved when he swallowed. Then Thomas burst back in, chattering about the chickens, and the moment broke. Yates stepped back, and Katherine turned back to the pantry, her heart pounding harder than it had any right to. The rest of the day passed in productive activity. Katherine cooked a large dinner, roasting beef and making biscuits and gravy, boiling potatoes and carrots, and baking an apple pie with supplies from the ranch stores. The men came in at sunset, 6 of them ranging in age from early 20s to grizzled 50s, all trail-worn and weathered but polite, thanking her for the meal with genuine appreciation. "Madam, this is the best food we have had since Mr. Ashford started this operation," one of them said, a stocky man introduced as Pete. "We have been choking down our own cooking for too long." "It is my pleasure," Katherine said, and found she meant it. The satisfaction of watching people enjoy food she had prepared was something she had not realized she missed. After dinner, the men returned to the bunkhouse, and Katherine cleaned the kitchen while Thomas dozed in a chair by the fire. Yates helped her, drying dishes as she washed them, and they worked in comfortable silence. "You are a natural at this," Yates said eventually. "The men were happier tonight than I have seen them in months." "Food makes people happy," Katherine said simply. "A good meal at the end of a hard day makes everything else bearable." "It is more than the food," Yates said. "It is the care you put into it. The men can tell the difference between someone just going through the motions and someone who genuinely wants to provide something good." "You have a gift for this." Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. "Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you." "Why from me particularly?" "Because you notice things," Katherine said. "Because you pay attention. Because your opinion matters." She had not meant to say that last part, and she felt her cheeks heat as soon as the words left her mouth. Yates set down the dish he was drying and turned to face her fully. "Your opinion matters to me too, Katherine. More than you might think." They were standing close again, and Katherine could smell the scent of him, leather and horses and something else that was just him. She wanted to step closer and run away in equal measure, torn between desire and fear. "We should finish up," she said finally, breaking the tension. "It is getting late, and Thomas needs to sleep." "Of course." Yates picked up another dish, and they completed the work without further conversation, but Katherine could feel his awareness of her just as she was aware of him, a magnetic pull that both thrilled and terrified her. When everything was clean and put away, Yates showed them to the spare room. A lamp was already lit, and the bed was made with clean linens. Thomas stumbled in, half asleep, and Katherine got him settled before returning to the doorway where Yates waited. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. "It was good, better than I expected." "Thank you for agreeing to come," Yates replied. "You and Thomas are welcome here anytime. I hope you know that." "I am beginning to," Katherine said. "Good night, Yates." "Good night, Katherine." He left, and Katherine closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. Her emotions were a tangled mess, but threaded through everything was a thin, bright strand of something she had not felt in years. Joy, she realized. She felt joy. The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Katherine came to the ranch twice a week, sometimes staying overnight, sometimes returning the same day. She cooked and cleaned and mended, and gradually, the ranch house transformed from a masculine, utilitarian space into something warmer and more welcoming. She brought small touches from her own home, wildflowers in jars, curtains for the windows, and Yates accepted each addition with pleasure. Thomas thrived in the new routine. The ranch hands taught him skills his father would have taught him had he lived, and the boy soaked up knowledge like a sponge. He learned to handle horses, to mend fences, to recognize signs of cattle illness. He grew brown from the sun and strong from the work, and Katherine watched him bloom with gratitude and some sadness that Robert was not there to see it. But more than Thomas's growth or the improvement to her finances or the satisfaction of meaningful work, what occupied Catherine's thoughts was Yates himself. She found herself watching for him, listening for his voice, aware of his presence in a way that went far beyond professional courtesy. He was unfailingly kind and respectful, but there were moments, brief and electric, when she caught him looking at her with something in his eyes that made her stomach flutter. They did not speak of it. They maintained proper boundaries, never touching except accidentally, never allowing themselves to be alone together for extended periods. But the awareness grew between them like a living thing, until Katherine could hardly remember why she had been so determined to remain independent and alone. It was late June, high summer in Colorado, when things finally came to a head. Katherine had stayed over at the ranch after a long day of cooking and preserving vegetables from the garden. Thomas was asleep in the spare room, and Katherine had gone outside to cool off in the evening air. The day's heat lingered and stars blazed overhead in the clear mountain sky. She did not hear Yates approach until he spoke. Could not sleep. Katherine turned to find him standing a few feet away, his face shadowed in the darkness. Too warm inside, I needed air. It was a hot day. Yates came to stand beside her at the porch rail, both of them looking out at the dark bulk of the mountains. "Katherine, I need to talk to you about something." Her heart began to pound. "All right." "I am not good at pretty words," Yates said. "I am a plain man and I say things plain. So I am just going to speak the truth as I see it." He turned to face her. "These past weeks, having you and Thomas here, have been the happiest I have known in years, maybe ever. And it is not just the good meals and the clean house, though I appreciate those things. It is you, your presence. The sound of your voice and the way you laugh at Thomas's jokes and the way you hum while you work. I find myself counting the hours until Wednesday and Saturday and being disappointed when those days end." Katherine's breath caught. "Yates, let me finish," he said gently. "I know this is complicated. I know you are still grieving Robert, and I know you have been hurt and made wary. I know I am asking something that may be too much too soon. But I have to tell you that my feelings for you have grown beyond friendship, beyond employer and employee. I have fallen in love with you, Katherine Montgomery, and I needed you to know that." The words hung in the air between them, and Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes. "I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything right now," Yates said. "I am not asking for an answer or a decision. I am just being honest about where I stand. If you need time, take it. If you do not feel the same way, I will respect that, and we can continue as we have been with no awkwardness." But I could not keep silent any longer. Katherine wiped at her eyes. "I have been alone so long," she whispered. "I taught myself not to hope for anything beyond survival. And then you appeared, and you bought back my cow, and you gave me work, and you were kind to my son. And I told myself it was just business, just practical arrangement. But it is not just that, is it? It has not been just that for a while now." "No," Yates agreed. "Not for me." "Not for me either," Katherine admitted. "I am afraid, Yates. I am afraid of losing again. I am afraid of depending on someone and having them taken away. I am afraid of my own feelings because they are so strong, and I do not know if I can survive another loss." Yates reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused, and his fingers wrapped around hers with gentle strength. "I cannot promise I will never die. I cannot promise nothing bad will ever happen. But I can promise that while I am here, I will do everything in my power to care for you and Thomas, to provide for you, to love you well. And I think that is all any of us can promise, is it not? To do our best with the time we have." Katherine looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. In the darkness, She could barely see his features, but she did not need to see them. She knew the steadiness in his eyes, the strength in his jaw, the kindness in his smile. "I think I have been falling in love with you too," she said softly. "I did not want to admit it, not even to myself. But watching you with Thomas, seeing the ranch you have built, working beside you these past weeks, I have felt something growing that I thought had died with Robert. And you are right, it terrifies me." "We can go slowly," Yates said. "We can take whatever time you need. There is no rush." Katherine shook her head. "I have been alone 2 years, Yates. I think I have already gone slowly enough." And before she could second-guess herself, she stepped forward and kissed him. For a moment, Yates froze, surprised. Then his free hand came up to cup her cheek, and he kissed her back with a tenderness that made her weak in the knees. It was nothing like the passionate kisses of her youth with Robert, all heat and hurry. This was different, deeper, a kiss that spoke of patience and commitment and love that would burn steady rather than bright and brief. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "Katherine, I want this," she said firmly. "I want you. I want a life with you. I am still afraid, but I am more afraid of missing this chance, of letting fear rob me of happiness. Life is too short and too uncertain to waste time being cautious." "Are you sure?" Yates asked. "Because once we start down this road, Katherine, I am in it for the long haul. I am not a man who does things halfway. If you are mine completely, and I am yours the same way. That is the only way I know how to be." "I am sure," Katherine said, and saying it, she realized it was true. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something stronger. Hope, trust, love. They stood together in the darkness, holding each other, while the stars wheeled overhead and the night sounds of the ranch surrounded them. Katherine felt something inside her that had been locked tight for 2 years finally open up, and the relief was so intense she started to cry. "Hey," Yates murmured, stroking her hair. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong," Katherine said through her tears. "Everything is right. That is what is so overwhelming. I had resigned myself to a life of struggle and loneliness, and now suddenly there is this, there is you, there is the possibility of happiness. It is almost too much to take in." "Then we will take it one day at a time," Yates said. "One moment at a time. There is no need to rush or to have everything figured out immediately." They talked for a long time that night, standing on the porch and then sitting on the steps, making plans and dreams in equal measure. Yates spoke of wanting a family, of having been too focused on building his ranch to think about personal happiness, until Katherine had appeared and shown him what he was missing. Katherine talked about her fears for Thomas, her hope that he could have a stable childhood despite the rocky start, her own dreams of security and belonging that she had thought were lost forever. "I would be honored to be a father to Thomas," Yates said, "if that is something you would want. I know I cannot replace Robert, and I would not try, but I can offer him guidance and support, and I already care for the boy deeply." "He needs that," Katherine said. "He needs a man in his life who can teach him and guide him. You have already been doing that, and he has flourished under your attention." "And you," Yates said, pulling her closer. "What do you need, Katherine?" Katherine thought about it. "I need to feel safe," she said finally. "Not just physically safe, though that matters, but emotionally safe. Safe to be myself, to make mistakes, to not be perfect all the time. I have been holding myself together through sheer will for so long that I am exhausted from it. I need someone I can lean on sometimes." "You can lean on me," Yates promised. "Always. And I will lean on you too, because partnership goes both ways. We will hold each other up." It was nearly midnight when they finally went inside, and Katherine checked on Thomas before retiring to her room. The boy was sleeping soundly, sprawled across the bed with the abandon of childhood. She kissed his forehead gently, then went to her own bed, but sleep eluded her for a long time. Her mind was too full, her heart too awake. Everything had changed in the space of a few hours. She had gone from widow struggling alone to woman in love, and the speed of it should have frightened her more than it did. But Yates was right that their relationship had been building for weeks, every shared meal and quiet conversation laying groundwork for this moment. The feelings did not come from nowhere. They had been growing all along, patient and steady as a river carving through stone. The next morning, Katherine woke to find Thomas already up and Yates making breakfast. It was a domestic scene that made her heart ache with longing. This could be her life, she realized. This warmth, this companionship, this sense of family. "Morning, Mama," Thomas said through a mouthful of flapjacks. "Mr. Ashford says I can help move the cattle to the upper pasture today." "If that is all right with you," Yates said, glancing at Katherine. His eyes were warm, and the look they shared was full of the previous night's revelations. "Of course," Katherine said. She poured herself coffee and sat down at the table, feeling oddly shy. Everything was the same as it had been yesterday morning, and yet everything was completely different. After breakfast, the men headed out for the day's work, and Katherine was left alone at the ranch house to finish her tasks. She worked steadily through the morning, but her mind kept drifting to Yates, to the feel of his kiss, to the promises they had made in the darkness. Around noon, a wagon appeared coming up the road, and Katherine recognized Mrs. Patterson, the pastor's wife, arriving for her weekly cleaning. Eleanor Patterson was a stout, practical woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and a kind heart. She had always been polite to Katherine but somewhat reserved, as if waiting to pass judgment. "Good morning, Mrs. Montgomery," Eleanor said as she climbed down from the wagon. "I did not expect to see you here on a Thursday." "We stayed over after working late yesterday," Katherine explained, suddenly aware of how that might sound. "Thomas and I were in the guest room." Eleanor's expression did not change, but something in her eyes softened. "I see. Well, it is good to have help with this big house. There is always more work than one person can manage." They worked together through the afternoon, and gradually, Eleanor's reserve thawed. She talked about her own late husband, her first marriage before she wed Pastor Patterson, and the loneliness of those in between years. "I know what people in town are saying about you and Mr. Ashford," Eleanor said finally, direct as always. "They are waiting to see if there is scandal." Katherine's cheeks flushed. "There is no scandal. Mr. Ashford has been completely proper." "I know that," Eleanor said. "I have been coming here weekly for months, and I have seen how he is with you and you with him. There is nothing improper, but there is also clearly affection, and I wanted you to know that I, for one, think that is a good thing. You have been alone long enough, Katherine. If you have found someone who treats you well and makes you happy, then you should grab that happiness with both hands and not worry about what the gossips say." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Eleanor. That means more than you know." "Just be happy," Eleanor said. "Life is too hard out here to spend it alone when you do not have to be." By the time Yates and Thomas returned at sunset, Katherine had made a decision. She waited until after dinner, after the ranch hands had gone to the bunkhouse and Thomas was occupied with a book by the fire. Then she took Yates aside. "I want to court properly," she said. "I want us to do this right so there is no question of impropriety. I want you to come calling at my homestead, and I want to introduce you to Thomas formally as someone I am considering sharing my life with. I want to give us time for people to get used to the idea and for Thomas to adjust and for us to be certain." Yates nodded slowly. "That is wise. How long are you thinking?" "A few months," Katherine said, "through the summer and into fall. And if we still feel the same come autumn, Then perhaps we could marry before winter." "I can live with that," Yates said, "though it will be hard to maintain proper distance when all I want to do is kiss you again." Katherine smiled. "We will manage. Good things are worth waiting for." "You are worth waiting for," Yates said seriously. "You are worth waiting forever for, if that is what it took." The summer passed in a blur of work and courtship. Yates came calling at Katherine's homestead every Sunday after church, bringing small gifts, flowers or ribbon, or once a beautiful shawl he had ordered from Denver. They sat on the porch and talked for hours while Thomas played nearby, and slowly, carefully, they built a foundation for a life together. The town noticed, of course. Heads turned when they walked together, and tongues wagged. But Alina Patterson's endorsement carried weight, and gradually, the talk shifted from scandalized to approving. The widow Montgomery and the rancher Ashford made a good match, people said. Both hardworking, both respectable, both deserving of happiness after their losses. Thomas, for his part, was delighted. He had begun calling Yates by his first name at Yates's invitation, and the relationship between them deepened from mentorship to something approaching father and son. Yates taught Thomas to ride properly, to throw a lasso, to read the weather signs and track animals. Thomas soaked it all up, and Katherine watched with a full heart as her son found the guidance he so desperately needed. By September, when the aspen trees turned gold and the air took on the crisp edge of approaching autumn, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she wanted to marry Yates Ashford. The fear had not disappeared completely. It never would, but it was manageable now, outweighed by love and trust and the simple rightness of being together. Yates proposed officially one Sunday evening as the sun set behind the mountains. He went down on one knee in Katherine's small parlor, with Thomas watching eagerly from the doorway, and presented a simple gold band that had been his grandmother's. "Katherine Montgomery, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" he asked. "Would you and Thomas come to the ranch and make it a home? Would you take a chance on a future with me?" "Yes," Katherine said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes to all of it. Yes." Thomas whooped and rushed forward to hug them both, and they stood together, the three of them, bound by love and hope and the promise of a new beginning. They married in October, a small ceremony at the church in Colorado City with Alina Patterson and the ranch hands as witnesses. Katherine wore a simple dress of deep blue that Yates said matched her eyes in certain light, and she carried wildflowers from the meadow. Thomas stood beside them, solemn and proud, and when the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was sweet and full of promise. The reception was held at the ranch, with food Katherine had prepared and music provided by one of the ranch hands who played fiddle. They danced under the stars, and Katherine thought her heart might burst from sheer happiness. This was real. This was hers. After years of loss and struggle, she had found her way home. The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Katherine moved into the ranch house with Thomas, and the homestead was left empty for a time, though they eventually decided to rent it to a young couple just starting out. Combining lives meant negotiating space and routines, learning each other's habits and preferences. But the foundation of love and respect they had built made it easier. Yates was considerate and patient, helping with household tasks and deferring to Katherine's judgment about the home. Katherine, in turn, learned to accept help, to lean on Yates when she needed support, to trust that he would not disappear or let her down. Thomas thrived in his new life. He had his own room in the ranch house, space for his belongings, and the freedom to roam the property. The ranch hands treated him like a younger brother, teaching him skills and including him in their work. He grew taller and stronger, and the haunted look that had lingered in his eyes since his father's death finally faded. By spring, Katherine knew she was pregnant. She told Yates on a warm April evening, the two of them sitting on the porch after Thomas had gone to bed. "We are going to have a baby," she said simply. Yates froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down carefully and turned to her, his face a mixture of joy and wonder and something like fear. "A baby, are you certain?" "As certain as I can be," Katherine said. "I have been through this before. I know the signs." "How do you feel about it?" Yates asked carefully. "Terrified," Katherine admitted, "and excited, and grateful. I did not think I would have another child. I thought that part of my life was over. But now there is this, and it feels like a gift." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "We are going to have a baby," he repeated, as if testing the words. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Katherine asked, though she could feel the answer in the way he held her. "Beyond happy," Yates said. "Beyond anything I have words for. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for taking a chance on me, for trusting me, for building this life with me." They sat together as the stars came out, making plans and dreams for the child who would arrive with the winter snows. Yates insisted on Katherine doing less heavy work, and he hired additional help for the household tasks. He fussed over her in a way that was endearing if occasionally overwhelming, and Katherine learned to accept his care with grace. Thomas was told and reacted with enthusiasm tempered by typical childhood concerns. "Will you still have time for me?" he asked Katherine privately one day. "Always," Katherine promised. "You are my firstborn, my beloved son. A new baby does not change that." "There is enough love in my heart for both of you, Thomas. More than enough." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Katherine's belly swelled, and she moved with increasing awkwardness, but she was healthy and strong, and the local doctor assured them there were no concerns. Yates was attentive to the point of being overprotective, but Katherine found she did not mind as much as she might have expected. After years of managing everything alone, it was a relief to have someone else worry on her behalf occasionally. In late December, as snow blanketed the ranch and icicles hung from the eaves, Katherine went into labor. It was a long night and a difficult birth, harder than Thomas had been, and there were moments when Katherine feared for herself and the baby both. But Yates stayed by her side through all of it, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to leave even when the doctor suggested he might prefer to wait elsewhere. Just before dawn, as the winter sun began to paint the snow-covered peaks pink and gold, their son was born. He came into the world squalling and red-faced and absolutely perfect, and when the doctor placed him in Katherine's arms, she wept with relief and joy and overwhelming love. "He is beautiful," Yates said hoarsely, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "Absolutely beautiful." "What should we name him?" Katherine asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one definitively. "Robert," Yates said immediately. "After your first husband, Thomas's father, it would honor his memory." Katherine looked at him with fresh love. "Are you certain? You do not mind?" "Robert gave you Thomas, and Thomas brought you to me," Yates said. "Without him, we would not have this life. It is right to honor that." So the baby became Robert Ashford, called Robbie to distinguish him from the father whose name he carried. Thomas was enchanted with his baby brother, and Yates took to fatherhood with the same steady competence he brought to everything else. The ranch house that had once been a bachelor's quarters was now definitively a family home, full of life and love and the small chaos that comes with children. The years that followed were not without challenges. Ranching was hard work, and there were dry years and harsh winters and markets that fluctuated unpredictably. Katherine sometimes struggled with the demands of managing a household and raising children, while still contributing to the ranch work she found satisfying. They had arguments about money and child rearing, and how to balance independence with partnership. But they weathered every storm together, the foundation of love and trust they had built proving strong enough to support them through difficulties. Katherine never forgot the years of struggle and loneliness, and that memory made her appreciate her current life all the more. She had learned that happiness was not the absence of challenges, but the presence of someone to face those challenges alongside. Thomas grew into a fine young man, tall like his stepfather, and with his mother's green eyes. He eventually took over managing much of the ranch operations, working side by side with Yates, and the two men developed a relationship that transcended the lack of blood ties. When Thomas was 21, he married a girl from town, and Yates and Katherine gained a daughter-in-law and eventually grandchildren. Robbie grew up with the ranch in his blood, never knowing anything but the security of a loving home. He was quick and clever, with his father's steady nature and his mother's determination. 2 years after Robbie's birth, Katherine had another baby, a daughter they named Emma after Yates's mother, and 3 years after that, another son arrived, Samuel, completing their family. The ranch prospered under Yates's steady management and the support of his growing family. They expanded the operations, bought adjacent land, and became one of the more successful ranching families in the region. But for all the material success, what mattered most to Katherine was the richness of the life they had built, the love that filled their home, the children and eventually grandchildren who made the house ring with laughter. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Katherine and Yates took a rare day away from the ranch, riding up into the mountains to a meadow they both loved. It was autumn again, the aspens turning gold just as they had been when they married, and the air was crisp and clear. They spread a blanket and sat together, looking out over the valley where the ranch lay spread below them. Katherine was 46 now, her hair thoroughly silvered, her face lined by years of sun and smiling. Yates was 53, still strong but moving with the slight stiffness of age settling into his joints. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked suddenly. "Taking on a widow and her son, you could have had a simpler life." Yates looked at her like she had lost her mind. "Regret marrying you?" "Katherine, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and Thomas and all our children. You are the reason I built this ranch, even though I did not know it at the time. I was creating a home for a family I had not met yet." "I think about that day," Katherine said. "The day I sold the cow. I was so desperate, so certain I had reached the end of my resources. And then you appeared and you bought her back and you stayed for supper. That was the beginning of everything. I fell in love with you that night," Yates admitted. "Sitting at your table, watching you with Thomas, seeing your strength and dignity despite your circumstances. I knew then that I wanted to be part of your life. I just had to convince you to let me in." Katherine laughed. "You were very persistent." "I was motivated," Yates said. He pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, fitting against him as naturally as breathing. "I have loved you for 20 years, Katherine Ashford, and I will love you for 20 more and beyond that if we are given the time." "We have been blessed," Katherine said. "I know that. After everything I lost, everything I went through, I was given this second chance at happiness. I do not take it for granted, not for a single day." They sat together as the sun moved across the sky, talking about their children and grandchildren, making plans for the ranch's future, remembering the journey that had brought them from that desperate day at the auction to this moment of peace and contentment. As evening approached and they prepared to ride back down, Katherine looked one last time at the view, at the ranch spread below them, the house with smoke rising from the chimney, the barns and corrals and the cattle grazing in the meadows. It was a life built on hard work and determination, on love and trust, on the willingness to take risks despite fear. She thought about the woman she had been, selling her last cow to feed her son, certain she had nothing left to lose. And she marveled at how wrong she had been, how much life and love had been waiting just around the corner if she had only been brave enough to reach for it. Yates helped her onto her horse, his hand lingering on her waist in a gesture both familiar and intimate. They rode down together through the golden trees, toward the home they had built and the family waiting for them there, toward a future still bright with promise despite the passing years. The ranch continued to thrive through the decades that followed. Thomas's children and Robbie's children and Emma's and Samuel's children filled the house and the land with new life. Yates and Katherine grew old together, their hair white, their steps slower, but their love undiminished. They sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set behind the mountains, holding hands as they had from the beginning. Katherine lived to see great-grandchildren, tiny faces that reminded her of Thomas at that age, of the desperate days when keeping one child fed and safe had seemed like an insurmountable challenge. She lived to see the ranch pass into Thomas's capable hands, and then to his son after him, a legacy built on the foundation of that single act of kindness all those years ago. Yates died first, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, and Katherine mourned him with the deep grief of losing her other half. But she did not regret a single moment of their life together. He had given her everything she had lost and thought she would never find again: security, partnership, love, family. He had taken a desperate widow and made her whole. Katherine lived 2 years beyond Yates, long enough to make peace with her loss, to pass on her stories to the younger generations, to ensure that everyone knew how their family had begun. She told them about selling the cow, about the tall stranger who bought it back and stayed for supper, about the love that grew from that single act of grace. "Remember," she told her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, "that your whole life can change in a moment. That kindness matters. That taking a chance on love, even when you are afraid, even when you have been hurt before, is always worth it. That the best things in life come from being brave enough to hope." She died on a spring morning when the wildflowers were blooming, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, at peace with the life she had lived and the legacy she was leaving. She was buried beside Yates on a hillside overlooking the ranch, where they could watch over the land and the family they had built together. Years later, decades later, when her great-great-grandchildren played on the ranch that still bore the Ashford name, they sometimes asked about the graves on the hillside. And their parents told them the story of Yates and Katherine, the cowboy and the widow, and how love had built an empire from one milk cow and one act of kindness. It became a family legend, the story told at gatherings and passed down through generations. The story of how their family began, not with wealth or grand ambitions, but with compassion and courage and the willingness to help someone in need. The story of how love can find you when you least expect it, if you are brave enough to accept it. And at the heart of it all was a simple truth that Katherine had learned that day at the auction and carried with her through all her years: that no matter how dark things seem, how desperate or alone you feel, hope can appear when you need it most. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stranger buying back your cow. Sometimes it comes in the offer of honest work. Sometimes it comes as love you did not think you deserved or could find again. But it comes if you are willing to see it. And when it does, you have to be brave enough to reach out and take hold of it with both hands, to trust that this time, things might be different. This time, You might get your happy ending after all. Katherine had taken that chance. She had allowed Yates into her life and her heart despite her fears. And in doing so, she had found not just survival but true happiness. Not just existence but a life rich with love and purpose and joy. That was the legacy she left behind. Not the ranch or the land or the material prosperity, though those things mattered. But the lesson that love is worth the risk. That kindness creates ripples that extend far beyond the initial act. That family is built not just through blood but through choice and commitment, and showing up for each other day after day. The ranch stood for generations as a testament to what could be built when two people chose to love despite their fears, to trust despite their wounds, to reach for happiness even when it seemed impossibly out of reach. And every person who lived there, who worked that land, who raised their children in that house, carried forward the story of Yates and Katherine, the cowboy who bought back the widow's last cow and stayed for supper, the widow who was brave enough to love again, the family that grew from that single evening of kindness and conversation and connection. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down through the years as a reminder of what matters most in life. Not wealth or status or security, though those have their place, but love, partnership, family, the courage to hope even when hope seems foolish, the willingness to accept help when it is offered, the grace to extend kindness without expecting anything in return. These were the values that built the Ashford Ranch. These were the principles that sustained it through generations. And these were the lessons Katherine wanted most to pass on to those who came after her, that no matter how difficult life becomes, no matter how alone you feel, there is always the possibility of something better. You just have to be willing to see it when it appears, to be brave enough to reach for it, to trust that this time, maybe this time, things will work out, to believe that you deserve happiness, deserve love, deserve all the good things you had given up hoping for. Katherine had learned those lessons the hard way, through loss and struggle and years of barely surviving. But she had also learned that it is never too late for a second chance, never too late to begin again, never too late to choose hope over despair. And in the end, that choice, made on an autumn day in an auction yard when a stranger bought back her cow, had made all the difference. It had led to love, to family, to a life so full and rich and beautiful that sometimes, even decades later, she could hardly believe it was real. But it was real. She had lived it, and the proof was all around her, in the children and grandchildren who carried her forward, in the ranch that still stood strong, in the love story that became legend, the widow who sold her last cow to feed her son, the cowboy who bought it back and stayed for supper, and the love that grew from that single evening, strong enough to last a lifetime and beyond, building something that would endure long after they were both gone. That was their story. That was their legacy. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything.